Hello, my dear friends. You're in the Military with Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in the world on the 13th of March of 2026. Today we have a lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And this video we will also start with a discussion of oil prices because currently this is the most important situation that will determine how exactly the situation in the Middle East and probably in the world will develop. So let's discuss everything in details, and first let's start with the yesterday's evening. According to media, according to different sources, yesterday we had the following prices: $95.33 per barrel for WTI crude and $100.33 per barrel for Brent crude. So the prices were pretty high, and we received reports that the United States of America made lots of interesting things with the purpose to stabilize the situation, like lifting sanctions on Russia and many other different things. Furthermore, we received reports that the Iranians began allowing different states of the Persian Gulf to use the Strait of Hormuz for the oil export purposes. So all these things made the situation when the oil market began stabilizing. And of course, the morning of the 30th of March of 2026 began pretty optimistic because the prices for main oil types dropped, not significantly, but dropped a little bit, and that was pretty optimistic. So let's discuss the prices on the morning. So 8 a.m. CDT time, we had the following prices: $94 for WTI and $99 for Brent crude. As you can see, yesterday the prices were around $95 and $100 accordingly, and today we had minus $1 per barrel. So that was pretty optimistic. And of course, everybody began following the situation to understand what is going to happen next. But 3 hours later, we start receiving updates that oil began rising once again. And 3 hours later, on 10 a.m., we had the following prices: $95, almost $96 per WTI, and $100, almost $101 per Brent crude. So we see that the prices for oil rose for the previous 3 hours from around $2 and so on. So, and this is a very negative situation, and we understand that most likely everything that the President of the United States of America and the Iranians made statements didn't help the oil market to be stabilized, which means that the United States of America and the President of the United States of America would be forced to make additional steps with the purpose to stabilize the situation. Of course, the United States has several options. Probably the easiest way is to lift additional sanctions on Russia or to ease them, but this situation will lead to the situation when the Russians will begin earning even more money than they're earning right now. Because today, according to information we have, Russia rakes in $150 million a day in extra revenue from surging oil prices. So if the United States of America lift or ease additional sanctions on Russia, this can lead to the situation when the Russians will begin earning significant number of dollars, maybe $200 million a day or even more. Of course, this situation will lead to the situation when the Russians will have a lot of money that the Russians most likely will be able to use to finance the conflict on the territory of Ukraine. So that is why the President of the United States of America understands that this is not an option, because from one side this can lead to the situation when the oil market will be stabilized, but from the other side we understand that the Russians will like it. The Russians will like it, they will have a lot of money, and so that is why the Russians will be interested in the situation to support this crisis in the area of the Middle East for as long as possible. So that is why we believe that the President of the United States of America chose probably more difficult way, but probably the way that he believes the United States of America will be able to control. And of course, once again, we're talking about the ground operation. Pentagon sends Marine Expeditionary Unit to the Middle East, Wall Street Journal. The Pentagon is moving a Marine Expeditionary Unit to the Middle East as Iran steps up its attacks on the Strait of Hormuz, according to the two U.S. officials. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has approved the request from the U.S. Central Command, responsible for American forces in the Middle East, for expeditionary unit, typically consisting of up to 2,500 Marines, the officials said. it's very difficult to say whether 2,500 soldiers is enough to secure the Strait of Hormuz, but probably this is the only option that the United States of America have with the purpose to stabilize the oil market completely, and then the United States of America will be able to finish the conflict with the Iranians. Another important update we received today from pro-Ukrainian sources. If you remember, yesterday we discussed that the Ukrainians sent not just drone operators that have experience to destroy drones of Shahed type. Today we received reports that most likely the Ukrainians would send FPV drone operators with the purpose to support the ground operation. And today several pro-Ukrainian sources published first articles where we can see proofs that indeed the Ukrainians redeployed their FPV drone operators in the area of the Middle East. For example, this picture was published by the 79th Brigade of the Armored Forces of Ukraine, and according to this author of this article, the Ukrainians sent FPV drone operators with the purpose to support the ground operation. Because we need to understand that the Ukrainians indeed are very experienced warriors using with FPV drones. Of course, we understand this, and we understand that, for example, if the United States of America decides to use their forces in the ground operation, of course, it would be very important not just to land infantry on the Iranian side of the Strait of Hormuz, because obviously this is something possible and most likely everybody is able to carry out this operation, but the most important is to dig in deeper. And we need to understand that most likely the Russians would send their own FPV drone operators in the direction of Iran to, let's say, to support Iranians. Maybe this is an option, or maybe the Iranians have their own, let's say, experienced operators of FPV drones. And of course, if anybody lands on the Iranian side of the Strait of Hormuz, then the Iranians would attack them immediately. So that is why the only way how to save the ground on the Iranian side of the Strait of Hormuz to have your own experienced FPV drone operators, and this is exactly what is happening right now. So the Ukrainians have already arrived in the area of the Middle East, and most likely they will support the upcoming ground operation. So we see that the Iranians understand what is happening right now, so that is why the Iranians are trying to shift the focus from the Middle East, from the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz in the direction of Iraq. And we have already discussed the situation during the previous video, because it seems that the main ground battle is going to take place on the territory of Iraq, and this is exactly what the Iranians are trying to develop right now. So because if something big is going to happen on the territory of Iraq, obviously the United States of America would be forced to postpone their ground operation in the area of the Strait of Hormuz with the purpose to stabilize the situation in the area of Iraq. So what we have here, first of all, we had reports that during the previous 24 hours, the Iranians attacked, for example, the base of French troops, and the president of France, Macron, stated that there were losses as a result of this attack. Furthermore, the Iranians continue attacking the US base in the area of the city of Erbil. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of videos and updates on this matter. Furthermore, we received reports that the United States of America lost at least one aircraft, KC-135, but the sources are saying that that was accident situation. And furthermore, we received the report that, for example, the Italians is pulling its troops out of Iraq. So this is a very important situation. We see that the US allies is leaving the territory of Iraq with the purpose not to be involved into these possible clashes and possible ground operations in this area. Because Iraq has, let's call it like this, common borders with Iran and with the allies of the United States of America. And the Iranians understand that this is a perfect foothold for the ground operation, and this is a perfect place where the Iranians can attack the military assets in this area on the ground without probably huge problems or huge logistic problems or something like this. So this is the current situation in the Middle East. Of course, the United States of America is trying to force the ships and vessels in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz to move forward, not to stand, because they're saying that the Iranians are no longer control the Strait of Hormuz, but probably this is not something like this. Furthermore, and another important statement was made today by the Iranian authorities. Iran will provide Indian ships with a safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz, cites the Iranian ambassador to New Delhi. Another important thing, that this is the second state that was allowed to use the Strait of Hormuz. The first one was the state of Iraq. This information was published this morning, and India has become the second state that is allowed to use the Strait of Hormuz for the export oil purposes, which means that the Iranians are trying to stabilize the economical situation for themselves and to have possibilities to trade with oil with the Chinese and with the Indians. Another important update today we received from China, from the China region. According to information we have, the United States is preparing a 14 billion arms package for Taiwan, mainly including PAC-3 Patriot missiles and NASAMS air defense missiles. The deal is reportedly ready for approval by Trump, but officials may wait until after his planned late March trip to Beijing to meet China's President Xi Jinping before announcing it. If approved, it would be the largest U.S. weapons sale to Taiwan ever, with another 6 billion in additional defense systems possibly following. So as we can see, something is brewing in the area of China. And most likely the President of the United States of America is going to travel to China with the purpose for the last time to discuss with Xi Jinping the status of Taiwan and what is going to happen next. And if the negotiation process goes in the wrong direction, then most likely the President of the United States of America will approve this deal, because it is very important for the United States of America to force China to shift their focus from the Middle East, from Iran itself, towards Taiwan. And this is exactly what the President of the United States of America is going to do, because States is preparing itself before a very big ground operation in this area, and that is why it is very important to be backed by the Taiwan conflict, which most likely is going to happen also either in the second part of 2026 or even in 2027 if everything goes wrong. So this is the situation. Let's wait and see what is going to be next, but we see that the conflict in the Middle East continue escalating. Now let's move to Ukraine. During the previous 24 hours, we also received lots of very important updates. As for the changes on the ground, telling the truth, we haven't received anything, and this is a very weird and strange situation. We see that both the Russians and the Ukrainians stopped their ground activities. Neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians are carrying out any offensive operations on the ground. The Russians are moving, but it seems that it's just something like attempts to check the Ukraine's defense through the line of combat contact. The only thing we see is massive attacks. During the previous night, the Ukrainians launched another massive drone attack through in the direction of the southern part of Russia. As you can see, the Ukrainians were using hundreds of drones. And later, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation stated that during the previous night, overnight, they destroyed up to 176 drones of the armored forces of Ukraine. And it seems that during the previous night, the Russian air defense forces were pretty successful and effective, because before I started making this video, by the time I started making this video, we haven't received anything, neither from Russian side nor from Ukrainian side, about the damage that the Ukrainians managed to deal during the previous night attack, which means that the Russians indeed most likely managed to repel that attack. Another important thing, according to different sources, the Russians are ready to carry out another massive missile attack through the entire territory of Ukraine. As of the end of the 13th of March of 2026, currently nobody can say for sure what kind of targets and what kind of areas of Ukraine the Russians are going to attack. Maybe the Russians will attack the city of Kiev and its energy infrastructure. Maybe the Russians will try to attack the western part of Ukraine, or maybe the Russians will try to attack the territory between the western part of Ukraine and Romania, because currently this territory is becoming very important for the Russian Federation. According to reports we received from Kiev, during the previous 24 hours, Zelensky had a meeting with the leader of Romania. And according to this meeting, the Ukrainians and the Romanians are trying to finish the construction of more energy lines that go from the territory of Romania in the direction of the western parts of Ukraine. I would like to remind you that currently there is a very big crisis in relations between Hungary, Slovakia, and Ukraine. And most likely in coming days, the Slovakians and the Hungarians will stop supplying Ukraine with electricity. And if it happens, and if the Russians carry out successful missile attack, combined missile drone attack, then this can lead to completely unpredictable consequences to Ukraine when talking about energy infrastructure and energy facilities. So that is why Ukraine is trying to stay on the safe side, and Ukrainians and Romanians are trying to build as fast as possible additional lines from the territory of Romania in the direction of the western parts of Ukraine, with the purpose, if the next or any other Russian missile attack destroy or damage significantly the Ukrainian energy infrastructure, then Ukrainians will have a plan B, and they will be able to receive additional electricity and energy from the state of Romania. So this is what is happening right now. So obviously the Russians will try to attack these lines on the level of construction when the Ukrainians and the Romanians are building them, with the purpose not to allow the Ukrainians to finish the construction of these lines in time. During the previous night, the Russians also attacked the territory of Ukraine, and the Minister of Defense of Ukraine stated that the Russians used 127 drones, which means that the previous night attack wasn't the biggest one, which means that the Russians still have potential to attack with hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles. But telling the truth, it seems that as for March and as for February of 2026, it seems that the Ukrainians during their massive attacks on the territory of the Russian Federation in total used more drones than the Russians during the same period of time. And this is a very important thing, because we understand that the Russians have bigger production capabilities. The Russians can produce hundreds of drones and maybe even thousands of drones a day and dozens of thousands of drones a month, but for some reason the Russians are not using them to attack the territory of Ukraine, which means that maybe these drones are being used by someone else and in some other part of the planet. So this is a very interesting situation. Anyway, let's return back to the ground and let's discuss the changes what we have. According to the information we have, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly in the Dobropolye direction. This is the only area with changes on the ground. So this is the end of the 12th of March of 2026, and this is the end of the 30th of March of 2026. According to information we have, the Russians are about to establish complete control over the settlement of Grishna, and the Russians are keeping advancing. As for the city of Konstantinovka, during the previous 24 hours, we received lots of videos from the southern and southwestern parts of the city. Here we can see how the Russians were attacking positions of the armored forces of Ukraine, but without changes on the ground, without additional attempts from the Russian side to improve their positions in the southwestern part of the city. You know that maybe the Russians are advancing, maybe the Russians are trying to break through Ukraine's defense right now, but for some reason neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians publish any information on this matter. Another important thing is the Kherson direction. During the previous 24 hours, probably for the first time since the autumn of 2025, we have received at least anything from this area. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to record significant number of Navy drones in the area of the Kinburn Speed, and the Russians with FPV drones destroyed these Navy drones of the armored forces of Ukraine that were moving in this area. It seems that the Ukrainians were planning planning something. Furthermore, according to information we have, during the same period of time, the Russians destroyed lots of reconnaissance drones that were flying above the same area. So, if summarize everything, the Navy drone operation in the western parts of the Black Sea and in the area of the Dnieper estuary, lots of reconnaissance drones that were destroyed by Russians. The Russians recently also attacked the Snake Island or Bile Island in the southern part. It seems that Ukrainians prepared some strong cards, and maybe the Ukrainians are planning to carry out a landing operation in the western part of Kherson with the purpose to achieve another media victory or something like this. So it seems that something is brewing in the western Zaporozhye direction, Kherson direction, and this something is going to happen also very soon. As for the Zaporozhye direction, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received almost anything. Just several attacks carried out by Russians with FPV drones on Ukrainian positions in the northern Zaporozhye direction. In this video, we can see how the Russians discovered the vehicle of the armored forces of Ukraine, and then the Russians attacked this vehicle in the area of the settlement of Novoalexandrovka. This village used to be under the Russian control, but this video is another proof that indeed, as a result of the February counter-offensive operation, the Ukrainians managed to recapture this settlement. Another video was published from the area of the village of Sosnovka. Here we can see almost the same story. The Russians were attacking drones of the armored forces of Ukraine that were moving towards positions of the armored forces of the Russian Federation, but as you can see, without changes on the ground. As for the Slaviansk direction, we haven't received almost anything from this area as well. As for the northern directions, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians continued bombing and attacking positions of the armored forces of Ukraine in the area of the village of Vysola. I would like to remind you that during the 2026, the Russians managed to capture two villages in this area, the village of Zeleny and the village of Neskushne, and now we see that the Russians most likely are going to keep advancing further in the southern direction with the purpose to establish complete control over the settlement of Vysola. And for these purposes, the Russians began bombing and attacking this territory significantly with the purpose to reduce strongholds and temporary deployment points of the armored forces of Ukraine in this area till ruins. Maybe in coming days we'll receive additional changes on the ground in this region. As for the Sumy direction, during the previous 24 hours, we received just small changes published by pro-Ukrainian sources. According to these changes, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly to the south of the settlement of Yablunovka, and according to these changes, the Russians approached this huge forest of the second Sumy defense line. And that's it for today. The Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.